Good afternoon, this is the Oxinity channel. Today we're going to be looking at some myths. So language is everywhere, it's in our conversations, we see it on signs, in the street, everywhere around us. Even when we're sleeping, we've still got language going around in our dreams. So we had the idea for today's chat thanks to a blog post from Kevin, who's with us today.
Hi.
And we're going to put the link in YouTube, I believe, so you guys can have a read. It's a good blog post. And so we're going to look at some myths and have a look. We'll have a look, see if they're true or not, because often myths, we hear them so many times that actually we think they become a fact. Yeah. So we're going to have a look at that today. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we have Kevin in Barcelona with us, with Carlos as well.
Yes.
And then in Malaga, Graham, as always. My name's Rob, so we'll get started, yeah? So we're going to start with your blog post then, Kevin.
Yeah, with my
so do you want to explain just a little bit what it was?
Yeah, of course. So I started with the deliberately provocative title, Extroverts are better languages than introverts. What do we think about that?
I disagree with that.
You disagree with that?
I disagree with that.
Why?
As a fellow introvert, sometimes.
Carlos, let's be honest now. We're going to talk about this.
As a fellow introvert. I have to disagree because I think most people learn at their own pace. Whether or not you're an introvert, extrovert, it doesn't particularly have to do with your personality. I think it has to do with your motivation.
Does it also have to do with the way you learn? I mean, would an introvert maybe learn more from reading or something like that, whereas an extrovert would be a lot more open to be going out and chat to people in bars? Would you say that has anything to do with it?
Right. I think it's more the method.
The method
you use. Are you using? Are you like you said, reading a book on your own?
Yeah.
Or
are you going out, chatting to people, learning on the street?
So is there a difference? Is there a better method? I think it depends on the person. It depends on the individual.
And I think that's the whole idea is that language acquisition is very personal. And for extroverts, maybe they learn a little bit of language, a little bit of vocabulary, some idea of structure, and they're so eager to get out into the next bar or restaurant and practice that limited vocabulary. So the idea about the blog post is, does that make an extrovert a better learner because they are more likely to go out and practice the language that they've got?
I don't know. Was that the conclusion?
Well, no. The conclusion is... Graham, go on.
No, I was going to say, I guess it's when you come to teach, I find extroverts, personally, I find extroverts really easy to teach.
Yeah.
Because they appeal to my style of teaching. When I first started teaching shy introverted people, I was like, I have to change how I teach, and I find it really difficult. It was probably one of my biggest challenges was trying to get someone who's shy to get a bit of confidence and get going. And I think maybe an introverted teacher is maybe kind of a bit better at teaching if you disagree, maybe an introverted teacher is better at teaching an introverted student. And extroverts, or is the clash better? What do you guys think?
Well, I think you won't find an introvert teacher within our groups. No, I think in order to be a teacher in our system, you have to be somewhat of an extrovert.
I guess.
I've got some quiet ones though.
Yeah, I don't know,
but that quiet is not introvert.
No.
True.
Well, I think one of the skills that an introvert has is the ability to lead a conversation, to ask the right questions, to allow an extrovert to take control. So an introvert's got an amazing ability to be part of a social group. It doesn't mean that they're antisocial. It means that they're able to kind of sit back, listen, pick on something that they think is exceptionally interesting and say, tell me a little bit more about that point. And an extrovert can carry that conversation. So I think an introverted teacher in the Oxinity community is actually a really good advantage.
I just don't know if we have any introverts in our community.
Maybe let us know in the comments.
Do you think you're an introvert? Although you said you were an introvert at the start.
I said occasionally I can be an introvert.
No. But I guess yeah.
Yeah,
because I would think I'm maybe more of an introvert outside of class, but then I kind of feel in class I'm More extrovert? I don't know
extrovert.
if that's...
Do you know, what inspired the blog post was one that I read called Are You an Introverted Extrovert or an Extroverted Introvert?
Mm.
And essentially,
Wow.
it explored the idea about that idea of, you do seek social inclusion, you've maybe kind of succumb to loneliness, but then sometimes you really crave that kind of time to be alone, to focus on your own development, maybe go into the mountains and breathe the fresh air. So maybe like everything, we're not binary, we're not extrovert or introvert, we're on some range in between. But I think the point of the blog ended up with the idea that it's not about being introvert or extroverted, it's about your attitude, it's about the time that you're willing to put into it, and about your willingness to observe.
I guess everyone should go and have a look at that. It's a good read. So any other myths that we've got then? Because we've had a little pull together of some ideas. Well, Graham, what's another myth that you've commonly heard in terms of English teaching or learning a language?
Sure. Well, I was just thinking, just leading on from that, it would be who's the easier student to teach or to learn? Is it kids? Who's in a better position to learn? And
what's the myth? Go on. Sorry.
Well, the myth is that kids are easier to teach. That's the myth, or that's the statement everyone goes. Or you say, I'm too old to learn. That's more the kind of learner's position. Oh, I can't do that. What was it to say? You can't teach an old dog new tricks.
What's your opinion?
People believe that. The older you get, the less prepared you are to change. Simple. You get old, you get stubborn. I'm not gonna change, and you're too scared to make mistakes. That's always been my opinion. Kids don't care. They'll try. I don't believe that at all. I don't know what you guys think, but I don't think it's true.
No, I kind of agree. I maybe would have been less inclined to agree until yesterday, actually. So yesterday evening, I had a class with a student for the first time. And we were just chatting, and she told me that she started learning English in her late 40s when she had a son who started learning English, and she'd never had any English classes before, never learned any English, and she started learning it in late 40s just because her son started learning in school or whatever. She speaks perfect English in short space of time. And so, it proves that anyone can learn, it doesn't matter the age. I think if it comes down to motivation, her motivation originally was that she wanted to help her son with his homework, and then she sort of kind of got this interest in the language that she'd never studied before, and then it just came from that, But
there's also something to be said about children don't have to worry about, they have to work, they have more flexible time, So there is some of that perhaps a child is faster, and perhaps an adult has to do maybe more extra work.
Do you know the other aspect is that as an adult we've been forming words using a particular shape of our mouth, a particular position of our tongue for 30, 40, 50 years in some cases. So not in this room.
Speaking about yourself.
Whereas children, they're quite new to the language, so they're more. I think that the position that they put their mouth or their tongue when they're speaking is more flexible. They're able to change it a little bit easier.
Maybe
they don't have these fixed
they can
pronunciation
kind of
habits.
copy. Because often, actually, sometimes to go on from that, maybe with some of the older students they find it actually difficult just repeating what you're saying. Whereas, I find kids quite easy just to do it.
Absolutely,
they can just do it.
Yeah. And then coming back to what Graham said, it is that fear for adults that how many students have we got that kind of start a sentence and then halfway through bring a kind of a connection or a connector word and say, is this right? And I don't know. You have to complete the sentence to give me context, and then I'll be able I'll be able to tell you whether you were right or wrong. But it's important to make mistakes, embrace them. Make several hundreds in a class, and you will learn.
We have a comment from Julie that she said one of the biggest myths that she's found about learning or teaching is that it's a linear process. So in other words, with every class there will be improvement, but it's not always the case. Very good point.
Totally. Definitely potentially an aspect of frustration for many students when they don't see progress because it isn't linear.
Well, I think it comes out of the point that you don't realize the progress you're making.
What do you mean?
And we don't, because we don't offer a test.
Okay.
right? We don't at the end of the lesson we don't give you a test. Have you learned these 8 words? Do you have these five words? We don't do that. And so they can feel that they haven't learned anything. Perhaps that's their impression, but that's not true.
No, and in fact, one of the most consistent aspects of our method is the quick questions. Everybody does them. It's the trademark of our community. And often I can turn to students, like maybe after 5 or 6 lessons, and say, "Do you remember how much difficulty you had differentiating between should, would, could, and responding appropriately? And now, rapid, fast.
Yeah.
This is a sign of progress."
And I think the best feedback they get is from their own peers. Because I always get the feedback, 6 months ago, I was working with this European or French or
with a client,
and now they tell me that I sound so much better. I'm more confident. And
or when they have meetings, they can start understand if they've gone from not understanding 10% of a meeting to now being understand 50% of a meeting. They can, in real life situations, they notice.
Exactly. So whenever I have, because people do tell us, I don't feel like I've improved in 6 months. I usually put a quick TED video, or like those short videos, 10 or 20 minutes, and have them watch it.
Okay.
And then I said, have you understood it? What are your impressions? What do you have? And it's a big awakening to the experience.
Wow, got this.
Yeah.
Well, and Harvey's written a comment here that you guys will be able to see on YouTube. But he's basically agreeing with what we were saying about the age difference. Adults may be more motivated, but yeah, we have another comment here. So I'll read it to you guys, and then we can talk about it. So bear with me. So it says passive language listening. I've been asked many questions about passive listening from both adults and parents, as it's a trend online now. As a Spanish language learner, I wanted to try this easy technique, but ended up with being exhausted. I think that if you aren't actively engaging your mind, you aren't learning much. However, you can use this as a supplement, like listening to music while you're doing the chores, working, etc., etc. What do we think? So this idea of
passive learning. Yeah, it's very interesting. Do you think that you can do your chores, do your washing, listening to a bit of Spanish radio, or a bit of English radio?
I was talking about this with students on Wednesday, because they said when they're working, they either listen to podcasts in English or English radio. And they were like, I'm just not learning anything. And we were kind of talking about whether kind of something is going in there, even though they're working and they're focused on their work, but they're still hearing English.
We've got distinct skills in language acquisition, haven't we?
Yeah.
And listening is one that is probably the most important in my view, to understand or to comprehend what's happening around you. You need advanced listening skills.
Yeah.
And while it might not seem at the time that you are learning actively, attuning your ear to the sound of different accents in different languages is vitally important.
Yeah. I mean, I did say, like, look, something will be going in, even if you just switch off from your work for 10 seconds without knowing, and suddenly you hear an expression or, I don't know, something, or a word pronounced, something will be going.
Absolutely. And I guess that brings us on to pronunciation. There's one big myth that I've heard students say a lot of the time when I want to focus on a pronunciation exercise. They'll say, pronunciation is just for people who already know the language. What do you think about this? Graham, I can see you shaking your head.
I think leading on with what you said earlier, Ken, that ability to make sounds with your mouth. We've got muscle memory that, I think when you're a kid, when you're learning how to speak your native tongue, there's all that babbling stage you go through. It's like when you're trying to speak another language and you've accidentally spat in someone's face because you haven't got the shape of your mouth to do it, and you're like a child, you're like a baby. Just so I believe that has to happen in early days. The pronunciation must be perfect because it's a muscle memory. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, it takes you 2.5 years or something to make all those English sounds and speak English properly, your native tongue.
Absolutely.
So you've got to learn how to, especially for the Spanish people, to do z and the and b or the.
That's the one I've been spending all week, the last week. Yeah.
Well, I know Carlos is very musical, aren't you?
Well, I was just thinking, it's like learning a song. You have to repeat until.
Yeah.
And
Goes from being a really bad cover to a pretty good one, right?
Exactly. Exactly. You have to keep practicing over and over again.
Over and over. But yeah, I think what it boils down to is language is a series of sounds put together in a particular way to make someone comprehend what your intentions are or what you're thinking. And without pronunciation, without correct pronunciation, what you're trying to say cannot be comprehended. Right. So it needs to be adopted and focused on from the early stages.
From day one, right?
From day one.
And with us, they have the correct pronunciation immediately.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Which I mean, which is one of the bonuses of our method, right? I mean, in terms of and one of the advantages of speaking with a teacher, because if you're reading, you know, often if I get students to read in a class, they can speak very, very, very good English, but they come to read a text, and suddenly pronunciation's out the window. God, I don't know where they're pulling these sounds from, but you know, because especially with English, where you know it's a language
that's
written and pronounced in very different ways.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
What are we looking for?
Well, one of the myths that you've just dived right onto it. We have to see the word written in order to understand it.
Yeah, which is, especially with a language like English, I think is a huge myth, because then they start try comfortable, right? I'll give you the example of comfortable. If they start pronouncing it like they see it's written, the number of times I've been in class and I spent, you know, ages trying to get a student to say comfortable, and they're going comfortable or something like that. Cover the words.
Vegetable.
Yeah. Cover the words. Right. Be like, just look at me. Comfortable. Boom. Get it first time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, because they're reading. Because in Spanish you read like what it says.
Yeah. So big myth. No, I don't think.
But does it help as well? Are there some circumstances where the written word does help? Especially with some words that sound identical, but perhaps are written slightly differently. Does that help a student differentiate between the two meanings? Where
I think we have to be careful, because with English we have a lot of there are no rules, right? Yeah. We have a lot of no rules. So when you have a word and if you try to read it as is, it's gonna be wrong.
Yeah.
So and then they get frustrated because they think it's gonna read what it says and it doesn't.
It's like, why?
And then so there's a bit of frustration. So we have to and then I have a lot of students say, what is the rule? What is this letter and this letter? It's like, unfortunately,
there are more exceptions
than
rules.
There are more exceptions than rules. So it's about doing it and repeating
and making sure that the students are aware of the rules in their own language, because this isn't exclusive to English.
Right.
In Spanish, in Farsi, in French, in any language, if you were to say, well, why do you say that? And they go, it just is. Yeah, it just is. Rules.
What about this comment then? Because if we're going on the idea of written, I have a comment from Liz.
Hi, Liz.
So she said, comment about a statement regarding the myth of better learning when seeing the word written. I think there is no black and white answer, and it depends on the student's learning style. I, for example, am a very visual person, and I retain a new word or expression much better if I associate it to how it is written. This happens especially with English, since the sound and spelling rules are so different from those from Spanish. So what do we think then? So this is Liz. So she's saying she likes to see it.
Right, she's agreeing with what we say. It depends on the individual.
Process.
The process. Yeah.
I think equally.
It's the
Equally, you could take away the written word there and replace it with an image, Liz, and that would be the same, right?
Yeah. Graham, did you have something?
Yeah. No, I was waiting to say I completely agree with Riz, but it says to do it. Well, you got to think about how all of our vocabulary. I kind of believe anyone below P3, the best thing is to give them an image, just like what Kev said, and introduce it to them verbally, which is how I learned how to speak.
Yeah.
And then the third stage, like if you're doing it in a model of teaching or whatever, I want to see it written, because I want to start to learn how that sound looks. You know, and you can develop that over time. But for the lower levels, up to immediate levels, you've got to let them hear it before you let them read it. Otherwise, they just start pronouncing incorrectly. Yeah. And once that's ingrained, you've got to take it out. And it's even harder to get to break a bad habit than it is to introduce a new good one.
Yeah. If we're going on the idea of this visual learner, etc., another one, we can put students into 3 categories: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. That's I remember being in school way back and doing like little tests, and if you did more A's, you were this learner. If you more B's and more C's, do we still?
But you're all three. You're always all three, right? You're never going to.
Exactly.
So you can focus. So if they're auditory, then I just think everyone should hear a word like this first and then see it. As long as you do all three, they're going to pick up at some point.
I think there's more recent studies, right, to show that it depends actually what you're learning, how motivated you are, and all this type of thing. As to, you can't just say, I'm a visual learner, that's it.
Well, at the same time, there are like sort of different teaching methodologies that suit different people, because while you may be all three, and that's you can't take it away, I think that sometimes you are one more than another. You're more auditory than visual. You may have 60% auditory.
But it's impossible to say I'm absolutely not visual learner, for example.
Yeah, I mean, there are circumstances where you would just be auditory.
Yeah. I mean, do you not find most people tend to say, if they were asked this question, most people would say I'm a visual learner? Or...
Oh, see, I'm very touchy. I'd probably say I'm kinesthetic.
Oh, kinesthetic. I mean visual or kinesthetic?
I'll keep my hands to myself right now, but,
What? Go on.
Now, what do you guys think? Because about this reading thing, like, how people learn things and introduce them to them, and they need to see it as well. But what about on kind of supervised reading? Because that's something I worry about students. I sometimes say to my students, until you get to a certain level, please don't go and read without someone making sure you're saying that right.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Going on just a little bit from that as well, I had some students who said, oh yeah, me and our fellow classmate in our lunch break every Wednesday, we speak English to each other. And I'm like, okay, I like the motivation, but if you're not capable of correcting each other in terms of structure and pronunciation, so it's kind of similar to the reading. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a particular student in mind right now who really wants to read articles in her spare time and discuss it when she comes to our lesson. There was a couple of times when I'd given her an article to read, I'd bring it back and want to kind of discuss it, and I was noticing some deep errors. So we've had to kind of adapt that, and I've had to give her an article and spend around 5 minutes recording the article, so that when she's reading it, she has the opportunity to kind of see whether the pronunciation is the same or different. She can pause, rewind. But yeah, I think if you do have students that go out and read, they can ingrain errors into themselves.
But I mean, the whole visual learning, you can do, there's a lot of information, a lot of videos with subtitles.
Yes.
So that's a good way. That's a good way.
I mean, are you hearing the word pronounced and seeing it written?
That's right.
In a YouTube video. Well,
exactly.
Depending, sometimes the translation's not very good, but
there are many sources.
Yeah,
there are many sources.
They're great.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes it's not exactly what you say. I have two good myths that I'd like to talk. Julie, well, another myth that she's mentioned is that in-person classes are better than online classes.
Oh, Julie.
Do we agree with that myth that in-person classes? Do you think it's a myth or do you think it's true?
For me, it's a myth.
For me, it's a myth as well, but I think it also, but it does depend. It does depend on the individual.
On the individual,
right?
I guess you're not going to, a kinesthetic learner, bringing it back to the last one, is not going to
away
benefit much from the online classes, I guess. But yeah, no, I think it is a myth. I think it depends on the ability of your teacher really to adapt to that situation.
I think so long as the system, you have a good system,
right?
Like a user-friendly system and this type of thing, then it's a myth. What about, Paul, teachers today aren't as good as they used to be? Is this statement true or false?
Well, it depends on what you consider to be a good teacher versus bad teacher.
What's a good teacher?
From the old times when they used to come around and hit you because you didn't learn a lesson.
Bring this.
We were better teachers with corporal punishment.
We don't do that anymore.
Hit me with your pronunciation stick. hit me. Yeah, I mean, teaching has changed, hasn't it? I think now we are we're kind of there to kind of guide somebody to their learning objective and not to kind of impart knowledge necessarily. Teaching as a methodology has changed. So I think to say teachers are now better than they were in the past or vice versa is a difficult comparison to make. We're using different methodologies.
Yeah.
I think, my only input would be students probably these days in many things, especially language, probably teachers are making them a little more fluent and not as accurate as they used to be.
Yeah.
Because accuracy used to be the only thing that was taught in classes, really. So I think that's maybe the difference. If you're judging it, how good is the level of, how great is the level of grammar in students, it's probably less than what it used to be.
Absolutely, but if you go to the United Kingdom and you deal with any corporation, are you likely to find that the native English speakers have got perfect grammar, perfect structure?
No.
I mean, I don't know whether you've ever received an email from from your bank or anything like that, but yeah, accuracy is probably less important than fluency nowadays.
Yeah, for sure.
But the teachers are
For
just
sure.
as good. Right?
Yeah, well,
very good.
I
Say yes.
Yes.
Right.
Moving on.
You mentioned about methods, Karen. Duncan says, are certain teaching methods proven to be more successful, or is everybody different? And is there a different method for every person?
I'm sorry.
Are certain teaching methods proven to be more successful, or is everybody different and there's a different method for every person?
Do you know?
We keep answering the question. No,
There'll be different methods.
Different
I mean, if we're
methods.
thinking in terms of, I was thinking when you said that, like grammar translation
Right.
method or TPR and this type
But
of
it
stuff.
all depends on how you learn.
Do you know, before the this live cast went live, we were discussing statistics and how 27% of statistics are made up, and 99% of statistics were made up. I think if you are selling a method, and you kind of really want it to kind of be the only method, you can manipulate statistics to make it seem like yours is the most successful or not. But yeah, I think it is. It comes back down to the fact that learning is individual, and as teachers, we need to wholeheartedly adapt to our students. Put them at the centre.
I think there's been a history in teaching failing, really it being teachers failing students. And I think if you stick to one methodology, you've a high chance of failing your student. If you're not prepared to change to fit whether they're kinesthetic, tutorial, because you're going to use different methodologies for each. And if you can't use them all, then you're probably going to fail your student at some point. I don't think there's a better methodology. I just think there's better teaching.
Very good. What about the idea? One more. We'll do one more. A foreigner will always have a foreign accent.
Foreigner will always have a foreign accent. So this is the idea that your Spanish students may say, I'm Spanish, I will always have the Spanish
I always have
accent.
the R, or I will always see the E in front of an S.
Do you think that these Spanish students would be, if they were from Barcelona, for instance, would they be able to replicate an accent from Andalusia?
Oh, sure they can.
Yeah? Can you represent?
Oh yeah.
I can.
Give us your best Aussie accent.
I don't have one.
Yeah?
I don't have one.
I mean, I know I can.
British, do British. Go on, you're sat with a load of
I
Brits now.
can.
Good evening,
Sorry.
old chap.
How are you? Can you do?
Yeah, well, I can.
You're quite good at accents, though.
Don't put me on the spot there,
On
Rob.
the spot, yeah.
I'm a wee bit good at accents, I tend to believe, but I don't know, I'm so sorry. I subjected you to that. But yeah,
You're trying to
I
do
think
Graham.
given with the right amount of
give us
alcohol...
your best accent, Graham. He just...
he's going to
Sorry.
pretend
I
you can't hear us
can't
now.
hear now.
Can
I've
you-
lost the
Sorry,
Graham, we hear
I'm
us.
on my phone.
Sure.
I don't hide.
Graham, give us your best accent.
The best accent, my favourite accent from Merocita, and there was this London guy who came on, but he spoke fluent Spanish, and it was the way he spoke Spanish just cracked me up. It was like, hola, ¿cómo estás? Mr. Winner. And I died.
Yeah.
I was like, this guy, oh my god. So now when I speak Spanish, if I want to have a laugh, worst English
Just do
accent
it,
yeah.
while I'm speaking
You
Spanish.
need to get yourself a monocle for when you use that accent. You need to make sure you've got the right
Totally.
props.
Hola.
Hola. Buenos dias.
Absolutely fantastic accent, that mate. I was very
That's
impressed with it.
better,
It's a
bit
bit
better,
better,
bit
isn't it?
better,
I tried to
bit
get it
better.
a little bit in. At least try and do your accent.
No. Anyway, that's it. That's enough. So yeah, good chat, guys. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
that. Like I said, we'll put the link for your blog post on YouTube, I believe, so people can go and check that out. and have a read about the introverts and extroverts.
I think we've got one from Julie LeBate as well on you can learn a language using only apps.
Yeah.
Myth debunked.
Is that from Julie's?
I
Yeah,
think
but
it's
there's another
Julie,
one, so
yeah.
we'll put that
I'll
link
write that
as
in.
well. Thank you, Graham. Cheers for that.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers to you guys here. As fun as always.
Yeah, and thanks for all the comments.
We will have another chat next week, as always, about who knows what, but we'll have a think about that, and we'll see you next week. Yeah.
See ya.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.